The wedding was just a couple of days away, and she still didn't trust him. While her daughter mocked her, the mother installed a hidden camera in the groom's apartment. And when they watched the footage, they were horrified and, in a panic, started dialing the police. Before we begin, please like the video and subscribe to the channel. Thank you, and enjoy listening. The phone rang at 3 in the morning. Amber jolted upright in bed so sharply that her heart dropped straight into her stomach and stayed there, refusing to return to its place. Nothing good ever comes from calls at that hour. She knew that for a fact. In her 54 years of life, Amber had learned one simple truth: if the phone rings after midnight, trouble is coming. Her hand reached for the nightstand on its own and found the cold body of her smartphone. Her daughter's name glowed on the screen. Natasha. My God, what happened? Mom, Emma's voice was shaking, as if she were standing barefoot on an icy floor. Mom, I'm scared. Please come. Come right now. Amber didn't even ask what had happened. She just threw to her husband, Nicholas, get up. We're going to Emma, and a minute later she was pulling on the first clothes she could grab. Nicholas, who after 30 years of marriage had learned not to ask unnecessary questions in critical moments, dressed in silence and started the car. The entire drive to their daughter's rented apartment passed without a word. Only Amber silently moved her lips, either praying or trying to talk herself out of panicking too soon. When they reached the third floor and Emma opened the door, Amber barely recognized her own child. Pale as a sheet, eyes red from tears, wearing a wrinkled t-shirt and sweatpants, she looked nothing like the confident young woman her mother had always been so proud of. Where's James? Nicholas asked first, scanning the hallway. Asleep. In the bedroom. He doesn't know anything. I found something. And I need to show it to you. Emma led her parents into the kitchen, tightly closed the door, and pulled a small flash drive from her pocket. Her hands were shaking so badly that she almost dropped the tiny device on the floor. Dad, remember you installed a camera in his car? The one you gave him as a wedding gift. Nicholas frowned. Of course he remembered. It had been his idea to play it safe before giving their only daughter in marriage to a man they barely knew. His wife had been against it back then, saying it was low and shameful. But a mother's heart is unpredictable. At the last moment, Amber herself had asked her husband to install that damn camera. Just to be sure. Just to be able to sleep at night. I watched the footage, Emma went on, her voice dropping to a whisper. I watched what he did yesterday while he told me he was driving to the next county for work. And I don't know what to do now. I don't know who the man is that's sleeping in the next room. Amber felt her hands go cold. There it was. That very feeling that had haunted her for months. That tight ache in her chest she had tried to silence by telling herself she was imagining things. Show us, Nicholas said shortly. Emma plugged the flash drive into the laptop on the kitchen table. A few clicks, and the image from the dashcam appeared on the screen. The interior of the very car they had given their future son-in-law. And behind the wheel James. The same James who was supposed to become their daughter's husband in 3 days. But before we find out what exactly Emma saw in that recording, let's go back 1 year earlier. To the day when fate first brought these two together at an ordinary gas station on the outskirts of town. Because without that story, it's impossible to understand what happened next. That summer was especially hot. The asphalt melted under car tires, office air conditioners worked at full capacity, and people dreamed of only one thing: to reach the nearest body of water and dive into the cool depths. Emma Benson was 26 years old, and to everyone around her, her life seemed perfect. The only daughter of a successful businessman, a beautiful young woman with a degree from a prestigious university, working in the family company in a position many of her peers could only dream of. Her own car, a separate apartment, the chance to travel the world several times a year. What more could anyone want? But Emma knew what others didn't. Behind the polished surface was a dull, aching emptiness that neither money, nor career, nor travel could fill. She was 26 and had never truly been in love. Not because she didn't want to, it just never happened. All the men who tried to court her seemed either too ordinary, too shallow, or far too interested in her father's money. You're too picky, her mother told her. You'll end up alone with your high standards. Waiting for a prince on a white horse, her friends laughed. They died out back in the Middle Ages. Emma just shrugged and smiled. She wasn't waiting for a prince. She was waiting for someone who would make her heart beat faster. Someone whose glance would send shivers down her spine. Someone she would want to become better for. And on that July day, she found him. Or rather, he found her. More precisely, her purse. Emma stopped at a gas station to fill up the tank. She loved driving. It was her way to escape work problems and intrusive thoughts. Just get in the car, turn the music up, and speed down the highway, watching trees and road signs flash past the window. That day she was dressed in her favorite style, a light summer dress with large flowers, wedge sandals, her hair pulled into a messy bun. She didn't look like a typical driver at all. More like a woman being chauffeured to some social event. She got out of the car, confident she had locked all the doors, and headed toward the gas station building to pay and buy some cold water. The heat was unbearable, and the bottle she'd brought from home was long empty. She left her purse with documents and bank cards on the front seat. After all, she had locked the car. What could happen? She didn't know that in recent weeks, a group of young thieves had been operating at this very gas station. Teenagers around 15 or 16, who had learned to break into cars so quickly and skillfully that even security cameras couldn't catch the moment of entry. They worked as a team. One distracted the owner, while the other two opened the car and grabbed anything valuable in plain sight. Seconds later they vanished into the crowd, while the victim still hadn't realized they'd been robbed. James Strong happened to be at that gas station purely by chance. He and a co-worker were transporting sports equipment from a warehouse to the fitness club where he worked as a trainer. They decided to stop for coffee, and a quick bite. The road ahead was long, and there'd been no time for breakfast that morning. James was sitting at a plastic table near the entrance, holding a cardboard cup of hot Americano and a meat pastry. He was just about to take his first bite when he noticed some suspicious movement near a small red car parked nearby. Two hooded teenagers were fiddling with the passenger door. One was clearly working on the lock, while the other looked around, acting as a lookout. A few seconds later, the door opened, and a bright woman's purse appeared in the first boy's hands. James didn't even think. His body reacted before his mind did. He jumped up so abruptly that he knocked over his coffee and rushed toward the red car. His nearly 2-meter height and 100 kilos of muscle allowed him to move at an impressive speed despite his size. The teenagers noticed him when he was already just a few steps away. The one holding the purse tried to bolt, but it was too late. James grabbed him by the hood and yanked him back. The second thief tried to strike from the side, but James shoved him in the chest so hard that he flew several meters and hit the asphalt. Everything happened so fast that bystanders didn't even understand what had occurred. 1 second 2 kids were messing around near a car, and the next one was lying on the ground while the other dangled in the air, held by the collar in the huge hand of a stranger. "Drop the bag," James said calmly. Realizing resistance was pointless, the teenager opened his fingers. The bright purse fell onto the asphalt. "And now get out of here. And don't ever let me see you here again." James let him go. The boy ran off without looking back. His friend, groaning and clutching his bruised side, followed him. Seconds later, both disappeared around the corner of the gas station building. James picked up the purse from the ground, checked it seemed intact, nothing had fallen out, and leaned against the red car, deciding to wait for the owner. No way he was leaving someone else's belongings lying on the asphalt. He didn't have to wait long. The gas station's glass doors slid open, and a young woman walked toward the car with a bottle of water in her hand. James couldn't help staring. She looked like a living picture from some old movie. Ruffles, flowers on the dress, those high wedge sandals. Not modern at all, yet incredibly beautiful in a calm, almost old-fashioned way. Emma noticed a stranger standing by her car and immediately tensed. Tall, broad-shouldered, with a face that looked like it had been carved from stone. The kind of man who, in movies, plays either the villain or the main character's bodyguard. And for some reason he was holding her purse. "Is this yours?" James asked, holding it out to her. "Yes, it's mine." "How did you get it?" James briefly explained what had happened. The thieves, how they'd popped her car open in the few minutes she'd been gone. "Are you sure you locked the doors?" he asked. "Because they opened it fast, literally in a couple of seconds." Emma frowned. She was absolutely sure she'd hit the lock button. Or was she? Maybe she'd gotten distracted and forgotten. God, how careless could she be? I don't know. I guess I forgot. Thank you so much. You have no idea what would have happened if they'd taken my purse. All my documents, my cards, they're all in there. It's nothing, James shrugged slightly. Anyone would have done the same. Emma studied her rescuer. He was nothing like the men she usually dealt with. No shine, no fake charm. A plain black t-shirt, jeans, sneakers. But there was something about him, this quiet sense of reliability, like it was impossible to get into trouble while he was near. And then Emma decided to joke. She didn't even know why that joke popped into her head. Maybe nerves. Maybe she just wanted to lighten the moment. You know, she said, pressing a hand to her chest like an actress, after everything that just happened between us, as an honest man, you're basically obligated to marry me. She expected him to laugh, or blush, or say something like, wow, okay. But what happened next threw her completely. Without a word, James dropped to one knee right there on the dusty gas station pavement under the burning July sun. He held the purse out with both hands, like a knight offering his lady a sword, and said, "My name is James. You've just hit me straight in the heart. I know it sounds crazy, but I don't think I'll be able to forget you. So I accept your terms. I'm offering you my hand and my heart. No rush, I'll give you exactly 1 year to think. Remember today's date, July 7th. 1 year from now, on this same day, you'll give me your answer. And for now, can I have your phone number so I can see you every day until then?" Emma stood there with her mouth open. She did not see that coming. This stranger with the stone face and fists the size of her head had just proposed to her. Seriously? Or was this some elaborate joke in response to her own? She looked into his eyes. Gray, steady, with a hidden warmth deep inside. No, he wasn't joking. Or at least only half joking. "My name is Emma," she said, deciding to play along with the rules of this strange game. "And I accept your terms, my knight. What time are we meeting tomorrow?" James rose from his knee, and Emma realized with surprise that he was almost 2 heads taller than her, even with her high platform sandals. "Tomorrow at 7 p.m. There's a cozy cafe not far from here. I can pick you up from work if you give me the address." Emma gave him her number and her office address, still not fully understanding what was happening or why she was doing it. But something inside her, something she couldn't name, kept telling her it was right, that this ridiculous, strange, impossible moment at a gas station was the start of something important. A year passed. 365 days, and Emma and James spent every single one of them together. They met after work, walked around the city, sat in cafes, drove out of town, watched movies, talked about everything and nothing. They got to know each other slowly, carefully, as if they were afraid of scaring off something fragile and precious. James turned out to be a man of few words. He spoke about himself sparingly, without any excitement. An ordinary family, school, the army, college, an engineering degree that he never really used. Sports were his true passion. Since childhood he'd done a bit of everything, from swimming to freestyle wrestling, even earning the rank of candidate for Master of Sports. Now he worked as a trainer at a fitness club and was also studying for a second degree at a sports institute. "I like helping people become stronger," he would explain. "Physically and mentally. They're connected." Emma listened and realized she was falling in love. With his calmness, his steadiness, his clumsy tenderness that he tried so hard to hide behind the mask of a tough, quiet man. She fell for the way he looked at her, as if she was the most valuable thing in his life. For his huge hands that could be so gentle. For his rare smile that made her heart stop every time. He didn't rush anything. He didn't push for kisses or hugs, didn't hint at something more. He was just there, solid as a rock. "You've become very precious to me," he said once, when Emma asked why he kept such a distance. "And I'm careful with you. I don't want to rush anything. Even if you decide I'm not brave enough or experienced enough later, I'll prove you wrong." Emma didn't know how to respond to that. Her friends would have dumped a guy like that ages ago, as they liked to say. But for some reason she didn't want to. She liked this slow, gentle kind of courtship. She liked feeling like something valuable and delicate, not just a prize someone wanted to drag into bed as fast as possible. They were intimate for the first time on Christmas night. Emma stayed over, and they celebrated Christmas together in his small rented apartment. After midnight, after champagne and salad, after some silly movie on TV, James kissed her for real for the first time. And everything that came after blew past every expectation she'd ever had. In the morning, he brought her breakfast in bed. Cheese cut unevenly, crooked slices of sausage, eggs slightly burnt, and a tiny cup of coffee that looked like a thimble in his massive hands. It was so touching that Emma cried for the first time in many years. "Do you regret anything?" he asked, looking straight into her eyes. "The only thing I regret is that we didn't meet sooner," she answered. The next day, Emma went to her parents' house for their traditional family lunch. And both of them, her mother and her father, understood right away something had happened. Something important and good. She was glowing from the inside. "Do you have someone?" Amber asked directly. "Yes, Mom. I met my person. The one I want to be with for the rest of my life." "Did he propose to you?" "Yes. On the very first day we met," Emma smiled, remembering that scene at the gas station. "And you said yes?" "Not yet. But I will soon." Her parents exchanged a look. Nicholas frowned. "Is he from a decent family?" "What does he do?" "He works as a trainer at a fitness club. His family is just normal." A trainer, Amber couldn't hide her disappointment. "Emma, are you sure? You could find someone. Well, more suitable for your status." "Mom," Emma's voice turned hard. "I'm not choosing a husband based on status. I love him. And whatever impression he makes on you, it won't change anything." James met his future in-laws a week later. Emma brought him to her parents' country house, squeezing his hand reassuringly the whole way and whispering for him not to worry. He was worried. You could see it in the tension in his shoulders, the stiffness of his movements, the short answers he gave. Amber and Nicholas were pointedly polite but cold. The conversation wouldn't flow. And then Duke came out onto the veranda where they were all sitting at the festive table, an old St. Bernard who had lived with the Benson family for 11 years. Huge, shaggy, with the wise eyes of an aging dog. He usually treated strangers with caution, never growling or barking, but never coming close either, keeping his distance. This time was different. Duke slowly walked up to James, sniffed his shoes carefully, then his knees, and then, to everyone's amazement, rested his heavy head on James's lap and let out a satisfied sigh. James gently scratched the dog behind the ear. Duke closed his eyes in pure pleasure. "Wow," Amber whispered. "He never acts like this with strangers." "Dogs can tell a good person," Nicholas said, and for the first time there was something like approval in his voice. From that moment on, her parents' attitude toward James began to change. Not overnight, not instantly, but the ice had cracked. They started inviting him to family dinners, asking about his life, questioning him about his plans for the future. Nicholas even offered him a job at the company once he got his diploma. James thanked him politely, but said he wanted to try himself first in what he truly loved. Stubborn, Nicholas concluded after that talk. But that's not a bad thing. Means he's got backbone. On July 7th, exactly 1 year after their first meeting, James took Emma to that same cafe near the gas station he'd mentioned back then. They sat by the window and ordered coffee and dessert. "So," James looked her straight in the eyes, "a year is up. Time for your answer." Emma smiled. "Yes, James. 1,000 times yes. I'll be your wife." He pulled a small velvet box from his pocket. Inside was a ring, simple but elegant, with a small diamond. Emma knew it had cost him several months' salary. And that was exactly why it meant more to her than any diamonds a rich admirer could ever buy her. "I love you," James said as he slid the ring onto her finger. "And I promise I'll love you for my whole life. No matter what happens." They set the wedding for early October, 3 months after the engagement. Time flew by in planning and chaos, picking a restaurant, choosing a dress and a suit, making the guest list, hiring a photographer and videographer, solving 1,000 little problems that always come with a big celebration. Emma's parents accepted their future son-in-law as family. The wedding gifts were generous, a spacious studio apartment in a brand new complex for the couple, and for James personally a brand new luxury class car. Let him know they would spare nothing for their daughter's happiness. You really don't have to, James tried to refuse when they handed him the keys. It's too expensive. We do, Nicholas cut him off. You're part of this family now. Get used to it. James accepted the gift, but his face made it obvious he felt awkward. He was used to relying only on himself and earning everything through his own work. Amber watched her future son-in-law and couldn't shake a strange feeling. On the surface, everything was fine. James treated Emma with obvious tenderness and care. He was polite with her parents, he didn't grovel, but he wasn't rude either. He didn't drink, didn't smoke, and hadn't been caught up in anything shady. The perfect son-in-law, the kind you could only dream of. And still, something wouldn't let Amber relax. Something hard to name. A shadow that sometimes crossed James's face when he thought no one was looking. A split second of distance in his eyes that appeared and then vanished. Nicholas, she said to her husband one day when they were alone. Don't you feel like James is hiding something? Why would you think that? I don't know. I just feel it. A mother's heart, I guess. Nicholas took his wife's words seriously. In 30 years of marriage, he had learned to trust her instincts. She was rarely wrong about people. So what are you suggesting? Hire a private detective? No, Amber shook her head. That's too much. I don't know. Maybe I'm working myself up. He is a good man, right? Seems like it. That's the thing, seems like it. We barely know anything about him. His past, his family. He only tells us general stuff, nothing specific. Maybe there's nothing to tell. Not everyone has an eventful life. Maybe. Or maybe there's something he'd rather stay quiet about. That conversation stayed between the two of them. They didn't share their doubts with Emma why upset their daughter right before the wedding. Especially since there were no real reasons for suspicion. Just a vague mother's gut feeling that could easily be normal anxiety for her child. But the little worm of doubt had already settled in Amber's soul. And with each day the wedding got closer, it grew. A week before the big date, the whole family gathered at the Benson country house to go over the final details one more time. Emma and James came, and so did James's parents, a modest elderly couple who clearly felt out of place among all that wealth. James's mother, Lindsay, was a quiet woman with hard-working hands and sad eyes. His father, Richard, was a former factory worker who had retired a few years earlier. They were both dressed in their best clothes, which still looked simple against the Benson home's luxurious setting. Please don't misunderstand, Lindsay said to Amber. We know we can't give the kids as much as you can. But we saved a little money for a gift. And James will inherit our apartment when the time comes. Don't worry about that, Amber replied gently. The most important thing is that the kids are happy. She looked at James's parents and couldn't understand what exactly was bothering her. Simple people, honest workers who had worked their whole lives and raised a son. Nothing suspicious. No dark secrets, it seemed. And yet, after lunch, the men went outside to start grilling barbecue, while the women stayed inside discussing the wedding menu and the seating plan. Emma helped set the table on the veranda, throwing loving glances toward James as he worked the grill. Amber caught those looks inside. Her daughter was happy, clearly happy. Happier than she'd ever been. Did she, as a mother, really have the right to ruin that happiness with baseless suspicions? Closer to evening, Nicholas excused himself, supposedly to get wine from the cellar. After a while, Emma went to look for him. The dinner had been ready for ages, but her father still hadn't come back. She walked the whole yard, checked the cellar empty. Then she noticed a light on in the garage. Strange. Who would need to be in there at that hour? Emma quietly approached the garage and peeked inside. What she saw made her heart miss a beat. Her father was standing by James's car, the one they'd given him for the wedding. In his hand was a tiny camera. Emma knew that model well people used cameras like that for hidden recording, when you needed to capture something important without being noticed. Dad, she couldn't hold back. What are you doing? Nicholas turned slowly. There wasn't a trace of embarrassment or guilt in his eyes. Playing it safe, he answered calmly. Your mother can't settle down. She says she senses something's off. So I decided. You decided to spy on my fiancé? On the man who'll be my husband in a week? Emma, listen - no, you listen. How could you? How could both of you? I trust James completely. He's never lied to me, never given me a reason to doubt him. Then he has nothing to fear, right? Nicholas kept installing the camera, completely unbothered. If he's clean, we'll laugh at my paranoia and forget it. But if he's not? If he's not, then what? You'll cancel the wedding? You'll forbid me to marry him? I want you to know the truth. Whatever it is. Better to find out before the wedding than after. Emma opened her mouth to argue, but the words stuck in her throat. James's face flashed in her mind the way she'd seen it that morning, thoughtful, distant. Like he was far away in his own head. When she asked if everything was okay, he brushed it off, said he was just nervous about the wedding. But she knew him. He wasn't the kind of man who got nervous for no reason. Something was bothering him. Something he didn't want to talk about. Fine, Emma said, surprising even herself. Install your camera. But I have one condition: James can never find out about it. Never. I don't want to start our married life with that kind of betrayal. He won't find out, Nicholas promised. They went back to the table, both a little on edge, but trying not to show it. Dinner went on as usual, full of pre-wedding fuss discussions, plans, toasts to the couple's happiness. James's parents left first, then the others started to head out too. All evening, Emma watched her fiancé in secret. He was the same as always, calm, quiet, attentive to her. But now she noticed things she hadn't before. Or maybe she just hadn't wanted to. That shadow that sometimes crossed his face. That moment when he seemed to slip somewhere deep inside himself. What are you hiding, James? What's been secretly eating at you? 5 days passed. Only 2 days were left until the wedding. The dress was ready, the restaurant booked, the guests invited. Everything was going according to plan. But Emma's anxiety grew with every passing day. James became even more closed off. A few times she caught him staring into space, thinking about something intensely. When she asked, he answered in short phrases, everything's fine, don't worry. But she could see it wasn't true. They'd been living together for 2 months in a rented apartment, waiting for the renovations to finish in the studio Emma's parents had gifted them. And in those 2 months, she had learned his habits, his moods, the way he showed emotion. She knew when he was tired, when he was upset, when something was bothering him. Right now, something was bothering him badly. And it had nothing to do with pre-wedding nerves. That morning, exactly 2 days before the wedding, James said he had to leave urgently for work. Something in the next county, he explained, avoiding her eyes. I won't be back until evening. You were going to the salon today anyway, right? Yeah. Manicure and a bunch of treatments. I'll be busy all day. Good. Then I'll see you tonight. He kissed her in a distracted, rushed way and left. Emma heard the front door slam, heard the engine start in the courtyard. And then silence. She sat still for a few minutes, staring out the window. Then she picked up her phone and called her mother. Mom, her voice sounded calm, but Amber immediately sensed something was wrong. James just left. Said he's going to the next county for work, and he'll be back tonight. And what worries you? I don't know. It's just... He's been strange the last few days. Like he's hiding something. I think. Maybe it's time to see what Dad's camera recorded. There was a long silence on the other end. Are you sure? Amber finally asked. Maybe we should wait a little longer. No, Mom. I want to know. No matter what the truth is. The day dragged on forever. Emma sat through all her beauty appointments, answering the stylist's chatter on autopilot, thinking about only one thing: what would she see on that recording? Maybe nothing. Maybe James really was just driving for work, and all her fear was just her imagination running wild. Or maybe not. That evening James came home even gloomier than when he'd left. They had dinner in almost complete silence. Emma tried to start a conversation, but he answered in short phrases, clearly lost in his own thoughts. Tired? She asked. Yeah, a little. Let's go to bed early. They lay down. James fell asleep almost instantly, the deep, heavy sleep of someone exhausted by something more than just physical work. Emma lay beside him, listening to his breathing, and waited. When the clock showed 1:30 a.m., she carefully slipped out of bed. She threw on a robe and tiptoed into the entryway. She took the car keys James always left on the small table by the door. Outside, the courtyard was dark and quiet. Emma unlocked the car and found the camera where her father had said he'd hidden it behind the dashboard. She pulled out the memory card. Her hands were shaking so badly she almost dropped the tiny piece of plastic into the darkness. Back in the apartment, she went into the kitchen, closed the door, and turned on her laptop. She inserted the memory card. A list of video files appeared, one for each day. She clicked on today's. The recording started the moment James got into the car and started the engine. Then a long drive down the highway. Then a turn off the main road onto a narrow country route. Small villages, fences, crooked little houses. Emma watched, feeling her heart begin to pound faster. James stopped near a small shop on the edge of an unfamiliar settlement. He got out and went inside. A few minutes later he came out carrying 2 large grocery bags stuffed full. He got back in and drove on. He stopped in front of an old wooden house with a sagging fence. The place had clearly seen better days, paint peeling, parts of the roof caved in, the yard messy and neglected. James stepped out with the bags in his hands. And then the front door opened. A woman came out onto the porch. Thin, worn out, dark circles under her eyes, dull hair pulled into a messy ponytail. She looked about 30, maybe a little older. The moment she saw James, she rushed to him and hugged him. Hard. Desperate. The way only very close people hug. Emma felt the ground slip out from under her. But the worst part was still ahead. A little girl appeared from behind the woman's back. 8 years old, no more. Skinny, fair-haired, with huge eyes. She saw James and ran to him with a happy scream. James! He lifted her up, spun her around, pulled her close. The girl wrapped her arms around his neck and pressed her cheek to his. Emma stared at the screen, unable to move. Unable to breathe. Unable to think. Who was that woman? Who was that child? Why had James never told her about them? The recording continued. James carried the bags into the house. Then he came out into the yard and started fixing something looked like the fence. The woman brought him a glass of water. They talked, but the camera recorded only video, no sound. Then they sat on the porch. The woman cried, wiping her tears with the sleeve of her worn sweatshirt. James put an arm around her shoulders and said something, clearly trying to comfort her. The girl ran around nearby, darting in and out of the house. It looked like a family. A real family, one he had hidden from Emma. Emma closed the laptop. Her hands were shaking. Her mind was pure chaos. He had lied to her. The whole time. This entire year. All those beautiful words about love, all those plans for the future, everything was a lie. He had another life. Another woman. A child. And in 2 days she was supposed to marry him. Emma grabbed her phone and called her mother. Her voice broke into a whisper. Mom. Mom, I need you and Dad to come. Right now. I watched the recording. There's something. She couldn't finish. Tears poured from her eyes, and the world blurred into a salty haze. Amber and Nicholas arrived 40 minutes later. They didn't speak on the way, each lost in their own thoughts. Amber braced herself for the worst. Her instinct hadn't been wrong. She had known from the very beginning that something about James wasn't right. Emma opened the door, pale, eyes swollen from crying, but no longer hysterical. The first shock had passed, and now she was filled with a cold determination to understand what was happening. James is asleep? Nicholas asked in a whisper. Yes. He doesn't know anything. They went into the kitchen. Emma turned on the laptop and showed them the recording. Amber watched the scream, the exhausted woman, the little girl running to James with a joyful scream, the way he hugged them both and felt a wave of icy rage rising inside her. I knew it, she whispered when the video ended. I felt he was hiding something. You can't fool a mother's heart. We need to call the police, Nicholas said firmly, pulling out his phone. This could be fraud. He might have staged the whole meeting so that Dad put the phone away, Emma said at last, without turning around. No police. Not yet. Emma, are you out of your mind? He has a secret family. He lied to you for a year. I don't know who those people are. Maybe it's his family. Or maybe it's not. I want to hear his version first. What version? You saw the video. He hugged that woman, kissed the child. What else is there to explain? Emma turned sharply. There were no tears in her eyes anymore, only steel. I'm not weak, Dad. I'm not going to swallow this quietly and cry into my pillow. But I'm also not making decisions without hearing the other side. A year ago I fell in love with this man. I was going to spend my whole life with him, and I deserve an explanation from him in person, looking him straight in the eyes. Nicholas wanted to argue, but Amber stopped him with a gesture. She's right, Nicholas. Let her talk to him. We'll be nearby. And if he's dangerous? He's not dangerous, Emma shook her head. In a year, he's never once raised his voice at me, never once lifted a hand. Even when we argued, and we did, like any normal couple, he always walked away to cool off, then came back and talked calmly. He's not the type who solves problems with his fists. You trust him too much. I did. Now I don't know. But I want to understand. I want to hear what he has to say. She glanced at the clock, almost 4 a.m. Go to the living room. I'll wake him up and bring him here. And no matter what happens, don't interfere until I ask you to. Her parents exchanged a look but didn't argue. They left the kitchen in silence. Emma stood still for a few seconds, gathering her courage. Then she took a deep breath and walked into the bedroom. James was lying on his back, arms thrown out. In sleep, his face was relaxed, almost boyish, nothing like the stone mask he usually wore. Emma looked at him and tried to understand. Who are you really? The man I loved? Or a stranger who played a role for a whole year? James, her voice came out unexpectedly firm. Wake up. We need to talk. He opened his eyes, sleepy at first, not understanding what was happening. Then he saw her face pale, frozen, and sat up in bed immediately. The sleep vanished in an instant. Emma? What happened? What time is it? Almost 4 a.m. And what happened is I watched the footage from the camera my father installed in your car. James froze. For a few seconds he just stared at her, and Emma watched his expression change: confusion, then understanding, then fear? No, not fear. Something else. Something like relief mixed with desperation. What camera? His voice went rough. Don't play dumb. You know exactly what I mean. I saw where you went yesterday. I saw that woman. I saw the child. They ran to you. Like you were their family. A heavy, thick silence filled the room. James slowly lowered his head. His shoulders sagged. He looked like someone had let all the air out of him at once. That's right, he said quietly. They are my family. Emma's legs went weak. She'd expected excuses, denial, some kind of twisting out of it. But not this. Not a calm confession. You admit it? Just like that? What's the point of lying? You already saw everything. So you have a wife and a daughter. And you were going to marry me without saying a word. James lifted his head. There was something strange in his eyes, not guilt, not remorse, but a painful inner struggle. It's not my wife, he said. That's my sister, Eliza. And the girl is my niece, Juliet. Emma blinked. Sister? You never said you had a sister. I never said a lot of things. Because I couldn't. Because I gave my word. What word? To who? James got out of bed, walked to the closet, and pulled an old, worn envelope from a stack of shirts. He handed it to Emma. Open it, please. She took the envelope warily. Inside were photographs. Old, faded pictures. In the first one, 2 kids, a boy and a girl, about the same age, 6 or 7, stood hugging and smiling at the camera. The boy was bigger and taller, already serious looking back then. The girl was fragile, fair-haired, with huge eyes. Emma looked at James, then back at the photo. The resemblance was obvious. "That's you?" "Yes." "And that's Eliza." "My older sister. A year and a half older than me." "Why have you never talked about her? Why have your parents never mentioned her even once?" James dropped heavily onto the edge of the bed and rubbed his face with both hands. "Because to everyone, to the whole world, Eliza doesn't exist anymore. She disappeared 3 years ago. And no one is supposed to know where she is. I don't understand." "Sit down, please. It's a long story." Emma sat in the chair across from him, arms crossed tight over her chest. She waited. James was silent for a few seconds, collecting his thoughts. Then he began to speak slowly, heavily, like every word hurt. "Eliza got married 10 years ago. To a guy she'd known since school. His name is Mark. Mark Hagen. Everyone thought they were the perfect couple. He was charming, funny, knew how to impress people. He worked in the police, an officer. Our parents were thrilled. A reliable man with a badge, with a future." He stopped, and Emma saw his fists clench. "The first 2 years were fine. Or looked fine, I don't know. Eliza never complained. And then Juliet was born. And he changed. Or maybe he just stopped pretending. What did he do? He beat her. At first rarely, then more and more often. He humiliated her. He controlled her every move, who she talked to, where she went, how she spent money. She couldn't even go to the store without his permission. If she was 5 minutes late, she'd get hit in the face." Emma felt her heart tighten. She tried to leave. Many times. She'd pack, grab Juliet, and run to our parents, to me, to friends. But every time he found her and brought her back. He'd show up in uniform, gun on his belt, smiling in a way that made your skin crawl. He'd say, "Eliza, get your things, we're going home." And she went. Because he promised that if she tried to leave again, he'd kill both her and Juliet. And she believed him. Because she saw his eyes when he said it. Why didn't she go to the police? James gave a bitter little laugh. He is the police. An officer. All his colleagues, his friends, his drinking buddies. She filed a report 3 times. The first one got lost. The second was buried. After the third, they called her into the station and explained that false accusations against an officer are a criminal offense, that if she came in again with these stories, she could end up behind bars. And Juliet would be given to her father, because the mother is a mentally unstable hysteric. Emma listened and felt nausea rise in her throat. She knew things like this happened. She'd read about it, seen it on TV. But knowing it in theory was one thing, and hearing it from someone who'd lived it was something else entirely. 3 years ago I decided I'd had enough, James continued. I couldn't watch my sister turn into a shadow anymore. How she flinched at every sound, how she had bruises under layers of makeup, how she lied to everyone that she fell down the stairs or hit a door. I started planning. Planning what? Her escape. A real escape, one you don't come back from. He stood and walked to the window. Outside, dawn was starting to break, the eastern sky turning a pale gray. I found someone who makes documents. I won't say how, it doesn't matter. Eliza got a new passport, a new name, a new life story. I rented a house for her in a remote village, 200 kilometers from here. I moved her things there while she was still living with him. And then one day, when he was on duty, she took Juliet and disappeared. Just vanished. And he didn't find her? He looked. For a long time. Pulled every connection he had, called everyone he could. He came to our parents, to me, threats, promises that he'd find her and punish her. But I stayed quiet. Our parents stayed quiet too, they don't even know where she is. I didn't tell them on purpose. So they couldn't slip up, even if they wanted to. So your parents think their daughter is missing? They know she's alive and safe. They just don't know where. It's better for everyone. Emma tried to process it. The story was terrifying, monstrous. But she could feel that this was the truth. James wasn't lying. For the first time in their entire year together, he was being fully, completely honest with her. "Why didn't you tell me?" she asked. "I would have understood. I wouldn't have told anyone." James turned around. There was pain in his eyes, real, unforced. "Because I swore to her. I swore no one would ever know where she is. No one. Not a single person on earth except me. I couldn't break that oath, not even for you. But you were going to marry me. How did you imagine our life together? Would you keep going there in secret, lying to me that you had work?" "No. I was going to tell you. After the wedding." "After the wedding?" "When it's too late to change my mind. When you become my wife, when we're one real family by law and before God, then Eliza and Juliet become your family too. Then I could trust you with that secret without fearing the consequences. And if I didn't accept it? If I said I don't want all of this secrets, a sister in hiding, her psychopath husband?" James was silent for a long time. "Then I would have let you go," he finally said. "Because Eliza is my blood. I can't abandon her. But I also can't force you to live with that weight against your will." Emma stood up. Her legs were shaking, but she made herself take a few steps toward him. "Show me the other photos from the envelope." James handed it to her. She flipped through the pictures one by one. There they were, James and Eliza as teenagers by some river, sunburnt and happy. Eliza in a wedding dress, beautiful, glowing, still not knowing what was waiting for her. Juliet as a newborn, a tiny bundle in her mother's arms. Juliet a little older, already with those same huge eyes, but still with a bright smile that would fade later, once she started to understand what was happening in her family. "How old is she now?" Emma asked. 8. She'll be 9 in December. "Does she know why they're hiding?" "Partly. Eliza told her dad was bad, and they left to be safe. Juliet is a smart kid. She remembers enough not to ask too many questions." Emma set the photos on the table. Then she looked James in the eyes long, hard, like she was trying to read his soul. "My parents are in the living room," she said. "My dad wanted to call the police. He thought you were a con man. I understand. You'll have to tell them everything you just told me. I'm ready. And if they don't believe you, if they decide you made all of this up to get out of trouble, I'll take their side. Do you understand that?" James nodded. "I do. But I'm not making it up. Everything I said is true. And I can prove it." "How?" "Let's go to her. Right now. You'll see Eliza, talk to her. And you'll decide for yourself who to believe." Emma didn't expect that. She thought he would protect his sister's location until the very end. And now he was offering to take her there himself. "Are you serious?" "Completely. I trust you, Emma. I trusted you from the first day, from that gas station. I just couldn't risk Eliza's life until I was 100% sure. Now there's no choice. You already know she exists. So you might as well know the whole truth." The kitchen door opened. Amber and Nicholas stood in the doorway, both tense, ready to jump in at any moment. "We heard everything," Nicholas said. "The walls are thin." James didn't look away. "Then you know I'm not lying. We know you told a nice story. But a story isn't proof. I offered Emma to go to my sister. Right now. You can come with us." Nicholas and Amber exchanged a look. "It could be a trap," Amber said quietly. "He could lead us anywhere." "Mom," Emma shook her head. "If he wanted to hurt us, he's had 100 chances this past year. He knows where we live, where we work, how we spend our time. If he's a villain, he's the most patient villain in history. Or the most calculated." "Enough," Nicholas raised a hand. "We're going. All of us. If it's true, we'll find out. If it's a lie, we'll find out too. Either way, sitting here guessing is pointless." James nodded. "Then get ready. It'll take about 2 hours." Half an hour later they were driving down the still dark highway. James at the wheel, Emma beside him in the front seat. Amber and Nicholas in the back silent and on guard. No one spoke. Everyone was lost in their own thoughts. Emma stared at the road unwinding in the headlights and tried to untangle her feelings. She wanted to believe James. With her whole heart, she wanted to. The story he told was terrifying, but it explained everything: his silence, his secrets, that shadow on his face. If it was true, then he wasn't a betrayer. He was a hero who had spent 3 years protecting his sister from a monster. But if it was a lie, if he'd made it up on the spot to save himself, then she didn't know who was sitting beside her. And that scared her more than anything. Dawn caught them on a narrow country road between two villages. The sun rose over the horizon, painting the sky pink and gold. Beautiful. Peaceful. Nothing like the drama happening inside the car. Almost there, James said, turning onto a narrow dirt track. A couple more kilometers. They drove past a few crooked houses, a pond overgrown with reeds, a half-ruined farm. The village looked half-abandoned. Out of a dozen houses, only 2 or 3 seemed lived in. People here don't ask questions, James explained, catching Emma's look. Locals mind their own business. Eliza is known as Vera Wilson, a widow from a neighboring state. She rarely goes into the village, mostly keeps to herself. And no one's seen Juliet officially. She lives with her grandmother in another state. She doesn't go to school? Homeschooling. Eliza teaches her herself. She's trained as a teacher. The car stopped in front of the same house from the video, but now Emma noticed it was solid enough. The fence had been patched with fresh boards. The yard looked reasonably tidy. Flowerpots sat on the porch. James turned off the engine but didn't get out right away. "I'll call her," he said, pulling out his phone. "I'll warn her we didn't come alone. She might get scared." He dialed and stepped a few paces away. Emma watched him talk fast, quiet, soothing. Then he nodded, said something else, and hung up. "She's ready to let you in. But please no sudden moves, no raised voices. Eliza. She's still very jumpy. Any loud sound, any sharp word and she shuts down, disappears into herself. It took her 3 years to stop flinching at a knock on the door." They got out of the car. The morning air was cool, smelling of grass and smoke. Someone nearby was heating a stove. A rooster crowed in the distance. The front door opened. The woman Emma had seen on the recording stood on the porch. Up close she looked even more worn out, thin face, sunken eyes, early gray in her light hair. But there was something new in her gaze now. Not fear, hope. And a deep exhaustion, the kind you get after carrying an impossible weight for too long. "James," she said softly. "Are you sure?" "I'm sure, Eliza. It'll be okay." He stepped onto the porch and hugged his sister. Emma watched and could see it. Those weren't lovers' arms. That was 2 people who had survived a lot together. Brother and sister. Family. "Come in." Eliza stepped aside to let them pass. "I'll put the kettle on." Inside, the house was modest but clean and cozy. Simple furniture, crocheted doilies, children's drawings on the wall. On the couch, legs tucked under her, sat a little girl with a book in her hands. Juliet. When she saw the strangers, she tensed and pressed the book to her chest. "It's okay, sweetheart," James said, walking over to her. "These are my friends. Remember I told you about Emma? This is her." Juliet looked at Emma closely, studying her. There was an unchildlike caution in her eyes. This girl had clearly seen things no child ever should. "Hi," Emma said, trying to keep her voice soft. "You have very beautiful drawings on the wall. Did you draw them?" Juliet nodded. She relaxed a little. "This is our house. Mom's and Uncle James's. It's beautiful. You're very talented." A faint smile flickered across the girl's face. She went back to her book, but without the earlier tension. Eliza brought tea in simple ceramic mugs and set a plate of cookies on the table. Her hands trembled slightly. "James told me what happened," she said, sitting across from the guests. "About the camera. About what you saw on the recording. I understand how it must have looked. And I'm very sorry it turned out this way." "You have nothing to apologize for," Amber said, to Emma's surprise, speaking first. "If everything James told us is true, then we should be the ones apologizing. For suspecting him. For installing that camera. Eliza shook her head. You were protecting your daughter. I would have done the same. I know what it's like to be afraid for your child. Please tell us, Emma said quietly. I want to hear your side. And Eliza told them everything. From the very beginning. How she met Mark in school, how she fell in love, how she married him. How, little by little, day after day, he took her freedom away. How he hid her for the first time before her daughter was even born over some stupid thing she could no longer remember. How she convinced herself it was an accident, that he was just tired, that it would never happen again. How it happened again and again. How she wore long sleeves in summer to hide bruises. How she lied to doctors, fell down the stairs. How one day he broke 2 of her ribs, and for a week she could barely breathe, but she was afraid to go to the hospital because they might ask questions. How Juliet was born, and everything became even scarier, because now she wasn't afraid just for herself anymore. How she tried to leave once, twice, a third time. And every time he found her. Every time he brought her back. Every time he punished her so badly she couldn't get out of bed for weeks. How she filed police reports, and every time they were buried by his friends in uniform. How one day he told her, "You'll leave me feet first. And your daughter too. I'd rather kill you both than let you go." And how she believed him. Because she saw his eyes. Because she knew what he was capable of. And then James came, her younger brother, who had always been there, who had always protected her since childhood, since school. He came and said, "Enough. We're leaving. I'll take care of everything." And he did. 3 years, Eliza finished. 3 years we've been here. 3 years I've lived under someone else's name, afraid to go outside, flinching at every knock on the door. But I'm alive. And Juliet is alive because of James. Silence filled the room. Amber was crying silently, wiping her tears with the edge of her handkerchief. Nicholas sat stiff and pale, clearly shaken. Emma looked at Eliza, at this broken, exhausted woman, and understood this was the truth. You couldn't make this up. You couldn't fake something like this. Why didn't you go farther? Emma asked. To another state, another country? James suggested it. But I can't leave our parents. They're old, they need help. This way James can come to me and to them. At least some connection remains. And if he finds you? This Mark? Eliza flinched at the name. James says he won't, that he's done everything so the trail leads nowhere. But I'm still afraid. Every day. Every night. I have nightmares that he's standing at the door. That he's taking Juliet away. I wake up drenched in sweat and can't understand where I am for a long time. Mom, Juliet lifted her head from the book. Are you crying again? No, sweetheart. Everything's fine. This is just grown-up talk. The girl looked at her mother seriously, far beyond her years. You always cry when you talk about Dad. I know. But Uncle James said Dad will never find us. Uncle James never lies. Emma felt a lump rise in her throat. This girl, 8 years old, just 8, already knew more about life than many adults. She knew what fear was. She knew what it meant to run from your own father. She knew what it meant to live in constant expectation of danger. Uncle James is a good man, Emma said, looking Juliet in the eyes. He's protecting you. And I will protect you too, if you'll let me. Juliet studied her for a long moment. Then she nodded. Uncle James said you're kind. He wasn't wrong. James walked over to Emma and took her hand. Now you know everything. I don't want to hide anything from you anymore. If you decide this is too much, that you don't want all of this in your life, I'll understand. I ask only one thing: keep their secret. No matter what happens between us. Emma looked at him, this big, strong man who had carried such a burden on his shoulders for 3 years. Who had lied to her not out of cruelty, but out of love for his sister. Who was ready to lose her if that's what it took to protect Eliza and Juliet. I'm not going anywhere, she said quietly. Do you hear me? Nowhere. She turned to her parents. Mom, Dad. I know you wanted to protect me, and I'm grateful for that. But now I'm asking you for something. These people, Eliza and Juliet, they're my family too now. And they need help. Real help, not just words. Nicholas stood up and walked over to James. For a few seconds they looked at each other in silence, measuring, testing. Then Nicholas held out his hand. I was wrong about you, he said. You're a worthy man. And I'm proud that you'll be my daughter's husband. James shook his hand. Thank you. But there's one thing we still need to do, Nicholas continued. Your sister can't live in fear forever. We have to find a way to protect her. Really protect her. Legally. How? James asked. He's a cop. He has friends everywhere. So do I, Nicholas said calmly. And some of them sit a lot higher than provincial officers. I'll find the best lawyers. We'll gather proof of everything he did to her. And we'll make sure that bastard gets what he deserves. Eliza lifted her head. For the first time that morning, something like hope appeared in her eyes. You're serious? Absolutely. James is part of our family now. Which means you are too. And we protect our family. Amber walked over to Eliza, sat beside her, and took her hands in hers. My dear girl, she said gently. You've been through so much. But you're not alone anymore. Now you have us. And we'll do everything to make sure you never have to be afraid again. Eliza looked at her first with distrust, then with surprise, and then she broke down and cried. For the first time in 3 years, not from fear, not from pain, but from relief. From finally hearing the words she had dreamed of for so long. Juliet put her book aside and went over to her mother. She hugged her and pressed her cheek to her shoulder. Don't cry, Mommy. Everything will be okay. Uncle James promised. Emma watched the scene and felt something shift inside her. Just a few hours earlier, she had been ready to break off the engagement, call the police, and erase James from her life forever. And now she realized she loved him even more than before. Because he wasn't just a good man. He was a hero. A real hero who had risked everything for 3 years to protect his sister and niece. She stepped closer and stood beside him. The wedding is in 2 days, she said. You didn't forget, did you? I didn't. But if you want to postpone it, I don't want to postpone anything. We're getting married as planned. And then we'll deal with everything else. Together. James wrapped his arms around her tight, desperate, the way he never had before. I love you, he whispered into her ear. I was so afraid of losing you. I love you too. And you're not getting rid of me that easily. Outside, the sun was rising. A new day was beginning, the first day of their new life. A life with no more secrets, only truth, only love, and hope that justice would finally prevail. The wedding took place on the scheduled day, Saturday, October 3rd. The weather was surprisingly warm for autumn, as if nature itself had decided to give the newlyweds a gift. Golden leaves swirled in the air, the sun shone softly and gently, and the sky was a deep, happy blue. Emma stood in front of the mirror in her wedding dress and barely recognized herself. Just 3 days earlier, she had been ready to cancel the wedding, the engagement, her entire life with James. And now she looked at her reflection and knew she was making the right choice. Amber adjusted her daughter's veil and brushed an invisible speck of dust from her shoulder. You're beautiful, she said quietly. I'm so glad everything turned out this way. So am I, Mom. Even though the day before yesterday I wanted to kill you over that camera. And I wanted to kill myself for asking your father to install it. But maybe it was for the best. Otherwise you would never have known the truth. You'd be living with a man without knowing what burden he was carrying. Maybe. But let's agree on one thing, no more cameras. Ever. I promise. They hugged tightly, the way they hadn't in years. Mother and daughter who had almost lost each other in this chaos of suspicion and fear, but found each other again. The ceremony was exactly how Emma had dreamed it. A formal registration in a beautiful hall, the exchange of rings, the first kiss as husband and wife. James looked unusually elegant in his tailored suit, yet he was still himself, quiet, reserved, with that same rare smile that still made Emma's heart stop. The guests kept commenting on what a beautiful couple they were. The way they looked at each other. The way they held hands as if afraid to let go even for a second. No one there knew what drama had unfolded just 2 days before the celebration. No one knew about the night conversation, the tears, the confessions, the dawn trip to a remote village. To everyone else, it was just a happy wedding. But for Emma and James, it was something more. It was the day they truly became a family, not just husband and wife, but two people with no secrets left between them. After the reception, when the guests had left and the newlyweds were alone in their new apartment, the studio Emma's parents had given them, James held his wife and didn't let go for a long time. "Thank you," he whispered. "For believing me. For staying. I told you you were not getting rid of me. Now it's official." She smiled and pulled him toward her. "And now enough talking. It's our wedding night, in case you forgot." They spent their honeymoon at home. The Mediterranean trip Emma's parents had planned was postponed. There were more important things to deal with. Nicholas kept his word. Just a week after the wedding, he found the best lawyers in the city, specialists in family and criminal law. He gathered them in his office and laid out the situation. "My new relative has been hiding from her ex-husband for 3 years," he explained. "He's a police officer who beat her and threatened to kill her. Her reports were buried by his colleagues. She lives under a false name, afraid to step outside. She has an 8-year-old daughter. I need this man to be punished, and I need her to be able to live a normal life." The lawyers exchanged looks. The case was complicated. Too much time had passed, evidence could have been lost, and the accused had connections in law enforcement. But Nicholas was not the kind of client people refused. "We'll need everything she has," said the lead attorney, Lawrence Brown, a gray-haired man with a sharp, focused gaze. "Medical records, photos of injuries, witness statements. Everything she's kept over the years." "She kept them," James said, who was also present at the meeting. "I made sure she had copies of all hospital records. Photos of bruises, she took them secretly, just in case. Recordings of phone calls he called her after she escaped, threatening her. I recorded every call." Lawrence nodded with satisfaction. "Good. That's something. But we need more. Neighbors who heard the screams. Doctors who documented the injuries. Maybe coworkers who noticed the bruises." The neighbors were afraid to get involved. He was a cop. But one woman, Mrs. Charlie, lived on the floor below them. She called the police several times when she heard screaming. Of course, his own friends showed up and nothing happened. But the calls themselves should be logged somewhere. "We'll find them. If those records exist, we'll find them." The work began. The lawyers requested Eliza's medical records from every hospital she'd ever visited. They pulled police archives. The very reports that had supposedly been lost were actually filed away and forgotten. They found Mrs. Charlie, a retired woman who had lived with guilt for years over not being able to help her neighbor. She agreed to testify. They found other witnesses too, a former coworker of Eliza's who had seen her come to work with a swollen eye. A paramedic who had responded twice and both times documented signs of abuse. Even a former classmate of Mark's, who said he had been cruel even in school, bullying younger kids, abusing animals. The picture that emerged was horrifying. Years of systematic violence that everyone saw, but no one stopped. Because he was a police officer. Because family matters aren't our business. Because it was easier to look away than to interfere. 3 months after the investigation began, the lawyers were ready to file charges. Not with the local police. Mark still had friends there, but directly with the district prosecutor, with copies sent to Internal Affairs and the Human Rights Commissioner. "We'll make sure this case is monitored," Lawrence explained. "So it can't be buried or brushed aside. Too many eyes will be watching." Nicholas used his connections. He knew people in the district administration and major media outlets, even at the state level. He didn't ask them to interfere, only to make sure everything was handled by the book. Sometimes that's enough. The complaint was filed in February. In March, Mark was arrested right at work at the police station where he was still serving as an officer. The news spread instantly. The arrest of a police officer is always a scandal. Journalists swarmed like flies to honey. Headlines appeared online: "Officer Tyrant, 3 years of abuse. She fled her cop husband and hid in a village for 3 years." When Eliza learned about the arrest, she couldn't come to her senses for hours. She sat on the couch, arms wrapped around her knees, rocking back and forth like a child. Juliet stroked her hair and repeated, "Mommy, it's okay. Uncle James said Daddy is in jail now. He won't find us anymore." James came to her that same day. He brought Emma with him. They went everywhere together now. "It's over, Eliza," he said, hugging his sister. "He can't threaten you anymore. Never again." "What if they let him go? What if he gets away with it?" "He won't. There's too much evidence. And too many people are watching now. He's finished." The trial began in May. Eliza testified using her real name in an official document for the first time in 3 years. It was terrifying. And liberating. She told everything. About the first slap across the face for oversalting the soup. About the broken ribs he kicked her while she lay on the floor. About how he smothered her with a pillow until she lost consciousness, then gave her mouth to mouth and said, "See? I saved your life. You should be grateful." About how he threatened to kill Juliet if she tried to leave. About waking up every single day thinking it might be her last. The courtroom listened in dead silence. Even the judge, who had seen everything in his career, took off his glasses several times and wiped his eyes. Mark sat in the defendant's chair and stared at his ex-wife with hatred. He tried to scare her with that look, the same look that had frozen her with terror so many times before. But now there was a metal barrier between them. Now she was not alone. "Do you want to say anything to the defendant?" the judge asked when Eliza finished testifying. She paused. Then she looked straight into the eyes of the man who had turned her life into hell for 10 years. "Yes," she said. "I do. You thought I was weak. You thought I'd never dare stand up to you. You thought I'd be afraid of you for the rest of my life. You were wrong. I'm not afraid of you anymore. And my daughter will never be afraid of you either. Because now everyone knows who you really are. Not a police officer. Not a defender of the law. A coward who beats women and children. And that will stay with you forever." She turned and walked out of the courtroom. James and Emma were waiting for her in the hallway. Eliza reached them and only then allowed herself to break down and cry. The verdict came 2 months later. 7 years in a maximum security prison. Loss of rank and a lifetime ban from working in law enforcement. A restraining order forbidding him from approaching his ex-wife and daughter after release. 7 years. Less than she would have wanted. But more than she had ever hoped for. Eliza learned about the sentence over the phone. James called her straight from the courthouse. 7 years, he said. Maximum security. He's going away for a long time, Eliza. She was silent for a few seconds. Then she whispered, "Is it real? I'm not dreaming? It's real. You're free. Truly free." That evening they all gathered at the Benson country house, a big, strange, but real family. Nicholas and Amber, James and Emma, Eliza and Juliet. Even old Duke was there, stretched out by the fireplace and graciously accepting scratches behind the ear from anyone willing. To justice, Nicholas raised his glass. To the fact that sometimes it really does win. To family, Amber added. To finding each other. To Mom, Juliet said, lifting her glass of juice. Because she's the bravest in the world. Eliza cried, but these were different tears, not from fear, not from pain, but from happiness, from relief, from knowing that the nightmare that had lasted so many years was finally over. A month after the verdict, she moved. Not back to the remote village where she had hidden for 3 years, but to a normal house near the Benson country home. Nicholas helped buy it. "It's a gift," he said when Eliza tried to refuse. "From our whole family. You deserve a normal life." Juliet started school. A real school with classmates and teachers, recess and tests. The first few weeks she was shy, unsure how to talk to other kids. But little by little she warmed up. Made friends. Started smiling more, even laughing loud, carefree laughter, like all normal children. Eliza got a job as an accountant at Nicholas's company. She wanted to feel useful, to earn her own money, not live on handouts. And slowly, day by day, she began to come back to life. Sometimes she still had nightmares. Sometimes she flinched at loud noises or sudden movements. Trauma doesn't disappear overnight, it heals over years, layer by layer. But now she had support. Now she knew she wasn't alone. A year passed. Emma stood by the window of her apartment, looking at the autumn city. Behind her, James was packing a bag for their trip to Eliza's. They visited her every weekend now, sometimes staying overnight. "Are you ready?" he asked, coming up behind her and wrapping his arms around her shoulders. "Almost. I just wanted to tell you something." "Did something happen?" Emma turned to him. There were sparks dancing in her eyes. "Yes. We're going to need a bigger room. And a crib. And lots of diapers." James stared at her for a few seconds, not understanding. Then it hit him. "You? Are you serious?" "Absolutely. 8 weeks. I saw the doctor yesterday. I wanted to be sure before telling you." He lifted her up light as a feather and spun her around the room. "I'm going to be a father. Emma, I'm going to be a father." "Hey, stop, put me down. I'm not allowed to spin like that now." He carefully set her down but didn't let go. He held her close, buried his face in her hair. "Thank you," he whispered. "For everything. For being here. For believing in me. For giving me a family." "We gave it to each other," she replied. "And this is just the beginning." The news of Emma's pregnancy became another reason for a family celebration. Amber immediately started buying baby clothes, even though there were still 7 months to go. Nicholas walked around proud as a peacock, telling everyone he was about to become a grandfather. When Juliet found out she was going to have a cousin, she was thrilled. "I'll help take care of him," she declared. "I know how I helped Mom with Mrs. Charlie's kitten." "A kitten is a little different," Emma smiled. "But we'll definitely need your help." Eliza watched all of this and smiled quietly. Her brother was happy. Her nephew or niece would soon be born. Her daughter was finally living a normal life. And she herself. She was slowly learning how to be happy too. It was harder than she expected. After so many years of fear and pain, happiness felt foreign, undeserved. But she tried. Every day she took a small step, and every day it got a little easier. The baby was born and made a healthy boy. They named him Nicholas, after his grandfather. Amber cried with happiness the first time she held her grandson. Nicholas pretended something had gotten into his eye, but no one was fooled. Little Nicholas grew strong and healthy, just like his father. James turned out to be an amazingly gentle and caring dad. He got up at night, changed diapers, rocked his son when he cried. Emma watched him and fell in love with her husband all over again, every single time. Juliet kept her promise. She really did help take care of her little brother. She came over every weekend, played with Nicholas, read him books, showed him her drawings. The boy adored his big sister, reached for her with his tiny hands, and smiled his toothless smile. Duke, the old wise dog, accepted the new family member too. He lay next to the crib, guarding the baby with the same seriousness he once showed guarding little Emma. 2 more years passed. Nicholas was running around and talking nonstop, sometimes hard to understand, but very enthusiastic. Juliet started 5th grade and dreamed of becoming a veterinarian. Eliza met a good man, a widower with an adult son, a doctor at the local hospital. They were just dating for now, but James saw how his sister blossomed around him and was happy. One winter evening, the whole family gathered again at the Benson country house. There was some kind of celebration, maybe a birthday, maybe just an excuse to be together. The table was loud and cheerful. Nicholas ran around the adults. Juliet tried to catch him. Duke watched this circus lazily from his spot by the fireplace. Amber sat next to her husband, looking at the scene at her big, strange, but so dear family. "You know," she said quietly, "sometimes I think about that night. When Emma called at 3 in the morning and told us to come. When we watched that recording and were ready to call the police. I think about it too. What would have happened if we hadn't given him a chance to explain? If we'd called the police right away?" Nicholas was silent for a moment. There wouldn't have been a wedding. Emma would have been alone. Eliza would still be hiding in that village. Nicholas wouldn't exist. Exactly. One wrong decision and everything could have been different. But Emma didn't let us make it. She insisted on talking. Yes. She turned out to be wiser than us. Amber smiled, watching her daughter try to take a piece of candy away from Nicholas before he ruined his appetite for dinner. We raised her well, Nicholas. That we did. James came over to his in-laws and sat down next to them. What are you thinking about? Remembering how we almost ruined your life, Amber answered honestly. You were protecting your daughter. I would have done the same. But we were wrong. You were wrong about the suspicion, but right about the intention. Those are different things. Nicholas slapped his son-in-law on the shoulder. A philosopher. Where did you come from, anyway? From a gas station, James smiled. Remember? All three of them laughed. By the way, James lowered his voice, I wanted to warn you. In 6 months, Mark is getting out. Early release, for good behavior. The smiles vanished from the Bensons' faces. What? Amber went pale. But he was sentenced to 7 years. Parole. He served half his time, got good evaluations. The board approved it. Can this be stopped? The lawyers say no. Everything's legal. Nicholas clenched his fists. So what now? Eliza will live in fear again? No, James shook his head. I won't allow that. I have a plan. What plan? I'll talk to him. Personally. Right after he's released. I'll explain how things stand. Have you lost your mind? He's dangerous. He was dangerous when the system stood behind him. When his buddies in uniform covered for everything he did. Now he's nobody. A former cop with a criminal record for domestic violence. No decent job will take him. His old friends turned their backs on him the moment he went to prison. He's alone. And you think a conversation will stop him? I think he knows how to count. And when he calculates the risks, when he understands that Eliza now has not just me on her side, but you, your lawyers, and your connections too, he'll decide it's easier to leave her alone. And if he doesn't? James looked his father-in-law straight in the eyes. Then I'll stop him. By other means. Nicholas was silent for a long time, then nodded. I'll go with you. You don't have to. I know. But I want to. Your family now. And I don't abandon my family. 6 months later, they did meet Mark. They found him in a small town where he'd grown up. He was renting a room, scraping by on odd jobs. He looked older, worn down. Prison hadn't been kind to him. When Mark saw James and the unfamiliar man in an expensive coat, he tensed up. But he didn't run. He knew there was nowhere to go. What do you want? He rasped. To talk, James said. The conversation was short. James laid out the facts. Eliza was under the protection of an influential family. Any attempt to find her, contact her, or reach Juliet, and his life would turn into hell. A job? Forget it. Housing? Doors would close everywhere. Even walking into a store would become a problem. That's illegal, Mark snapped. Maybe, Nicholas agreed calmly. But you're a former cop. You know how things work in practice, don't you? Mark stayed silent, drilling them with his eyes. James saw the same hatred there that had been in the courtroom. But he also saw something else. Fear. The realization that he was no longer in control. What do I have to do? Mark finally asked. Leave. Far away. Start a new life. Forget you ever had a wife and a daughter. That's it. And if I refuse? Then we'll make your life unbearable. Every day. Until you change your mind. Mark gave a crooked, bitter smile. You think you've won? I can wait. A year, 2, 10. Sooner or later you'll loosen your grip. And then James stepped closer right up to him. Loomed over the man who had tortured his sister. And then what? His voice was quiet, which somehow made it even more frightening. You spent 10 years beating a woman who couldn't fight back. Threatening to kill a child. You think I'll let you do that again? He didn't raise his voice. Didn't clench his fists. But Mark took a step back without meaning to. Leave, James repeated. This isn't a request. It's the only option where you get to live the rest of your life in peace. We'll even help give you money to relocate, find you a job in another state. In return, you disappear. Forever. Mark stared at him for a long, heavy moment. Then he looked at Nicholas, who stood a little apart with his arms crossed. He understood. Understood that he had lost. That his time was over. That these people weren't bluffing. And they wouldn't back down. How much? He asked dully. 100,000. To get started. Plus a contact who'll help with work. And you'll leave me alone? As long as you leave Eliza and Juliet alone, yes. Mark was silent for another minute. Then he nodded. Fine. Deal. He left a week later. Where to they didn't ask. The important thing was that he was gone. The important thing was that Eliza could finally breathe. When James told his sister about the meeting, she was quiet for a long time. Then she asked, "Do you think he'll keep his word?" "I do." "He's a coward, Eliza. He always was. He hurt you because you couldn't fight back. And when people who could stand up to him did, he gave up. And if he comes back? He won't. But even if he tries, we're ready. We'll always be ready now." Eliza hugged her brother tightly, gratefully. "Thank you," she whispered. "For everything. For all these years. For not abandoning me. For believing in me. You're my sister. I'd do anything for you." 5 more years passed. Little Nicholas was already in school, 1st grade. Juliet was finishing high school, preparing to apply to a veterinary academy. Eliza married that same Dr. A modest wedding, just for family, but very happy. James was still working as a trainer, now in his own fitness center that he and Emma had opened a couple of years earlier. The business was doing well. Emma handled marketing, he handled training. A perfect partnership. Amber and Nicholas Benson had grown older, but they hadn't slowed down. He still ran his company, she took care of the house and babysat her grandson at every opportunity. Duke, sadly, didn't live to see those days. He passed away quietly in his sleep at 16, a respectable age for a St. Bernard. They buried him in the garden of the country house under an old apple tree. A stone marked the grave, engraved with the words, "Duke. A loyal friend." He always knew who the good people were. Nicholas often brought flowers there and talked to the stone, telling Duke about his life. Everyone pretended not to notice, but secretly found it touching. One summer evening, the whole family gathered again, this time for Nicholas's birthday. He was turning 65 and proudly announced that he was handing over the company to his son from his first marriage, who had long worked as his deputy. "And I'm going to rest," he said, raising his glass. "Travel with Amber, spend time with my grandson. I've earned it, after all." "Grandpa, will you take me traveling with you?" little Nicholas asked. "Of course I will. Where do you want to go?" "To Africa. To see lions." "Then Africa it is." James watched the scene and smiled. Once, he had been just a trainer from a simple family who happened to save a stranger's handbag at a gas station. And now he had a wife he loved more than life itself. A son growing up smart and kind. A sister who was finally happy. A big family that had accepted him as one of their own. Emma walked up to him and took his hand. "What are you thinking about?" "About how lucky I am." "I'm lucky too. You know, sometimes I think about that day at the gas station. What if I hadn't forgotten to lock the car? Or if you hadn't been sitting at that exact table? Or if you hadn't decided to step in? We would never have met. Yes. Our whole lives would have turned out differently. It's scary to think about. So much depends on chance." James put his arm around her shoulders. "Maybe it wasn't chance. Maybe we were meant to meet. And everything else too. Do you believe in fate?" "I believe in you." "That's enough." The sun was setting beyond the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. Children were laughing in the garden, glasses were clinking, soft music was playing. An ordinary family evening. Ordinary human happiness earned, fought for, deserved. Amber walked over to her husband, who was standing by the window watching the sunset. You know, Nicholas, she said quietly, I will never again install surveillance cameras on relatives. He laughed. Why not? Because I realized something important. You can't test trust through spying. You can only build it day by day, action by action. And if someone loves you, they will prove it with what they do. Sooner or later. Like James. Like James. Nicholas wrapped his arm around his wife. We have a good life, Amber. Yes. A good one. They stood by the window, two people no longer young, who had lived together for more than 30 years. Behind them were hardships and joys, arguments and reconciliations, fears and hopes. And ahead many more years. Together. With family. With those they loved. What could be greater happiness than that? Far away, in another city, a man named Mark Hagan worked as a warehouse loader. He lived alone in a rented room and barely spoke to anyone. Sometimes at night, he remembered his ex-wife and daughter. He remembered them with hatred, but less and less often. Years passed. The hatred dulled, turning first into resentment, then into indifference. He didn't try to look for them. He didn't call or write. Not because he had become a better person, but because he understood it wasn't worth it. That the people now standing behind Eliza were not bluffing. That it was easier to forget and move on. Justice had prevailed. Not perfectly, not completely, but it had prevailed. A bad man was punished. Good people were happy. It doesn't happen every time. But sometimes it does. And that alone means something. The final word in this story was written many years later by Juliet herself, when she was already an adult, a veterinarian, a wife, and a mother. She wrote in her diary, "Today Mom turned 60. We all gathered as a family, like always. Like every year. Uncle James and Aunt Emma, Nicholas with his wife, my children. Mom laughed, danced with her husband, played with her grandchildren. She was happy. Truly happy. I remember what she used to be like. Scared, broken, hiding from her own shadow. I remember the house in the village where we lived for 3 years. I remember how she flinched at every knock. I remember how she cried at night, thinking I couldn't hear her. And now I look at her and can't believe it's the same person. Uncle James saved us. He and the entire Benson family. They gave us a second chance at life, at happiness, at love. They showed me that good people exist. That the world isn't only pain and fear. Every day I thank fate for that gas station. For the thieves who tried to steal a handbag. For Uncle James, who happened to be nearby. For Aunt Emma, who jokingly suggested that he marry her. Life is made of moments like these. Of small decisions we make every day. Of people we meet along the way. I was lucky. We were all lucky. And I will never forget that. She closed the diary and went back to the guests, to her big, loud, loving family. Outside, the sun was setting. A new evening was beginning. An ordinary family evening. A happy one.